Hello, good afternoon. So I am super excited, as always, to be on this training with you today. It feels a little different. I feel like my mind was blown over the last few days. As I shared with all of you, I spent the last couple days in Arizona for a conference with the amazing Allie Brown. And like I said, I still feel a little numb. A lot is percolating. It was just such an interesting and different experience than I've ever had at an event. So I'm excited to share some of the things that came out of that event. In fact, there are 6 big themes that I want to share with you today. And they're things that I'm still having conversations with myself around. And so I'm really going to invite a deeper conversation in this training, it's not even a training, in this sharing, in this kind of opening your mind to new ways of thinking about your business, because this is going to be different. And like I said, the event was very different simply because it wasn't a content-based event. There wasn't loads of content. It was designed to open up the mind and to start creating some questions. And that's what I want to do for you today as well, because it was really an impactful experience for me. I actually still feel quite a bit of emotion around it, which is interesting. And so I hope that it stirs some of the same things in your soul that it has for me. Whew. Okay, so let's go ahead and start. So again, I'm going to share 6 big things that are still flooding into my heart, flooding into my brain, flooding into my soul from a couple of days ago. One real quick thing, just let me fill you in. The event that I went to was with Allie Brown. It was called the Creative Strategy Workshop. It was limited to 50 women entrepreneurs. There were qualifications you had to meet in order to even qualify for the event. It was a high-end event. Every single person invested $3,000 just to be in the room. That doesn't include travel costs. It doesn't include anything else. And some of the qualifications to be in the room is you had to have a multiple 6-figure business. You had to fill out a really long application process about how you would contribute to the group, what you hope to get out of the group, how you were there to get into meaningful, vulnerable, deep conversation. It was really, truly an event, again, very different than anything I'd ever been to. And the women and the entrepreneurs in the room were phenomenal. So let me just share, as soon as I walked in the door, I saw 2 coaches, 2 leaders in the coaching industry that I had been following since the minute I got my coaching certification 10 years ago. And I immediately had massive bubbles. Oh my goodness, like huge questions like, gosh, what do I really have to contribute in this room? And some of the things I alluded to before I even went into the room. But again, so that's a little background on this event. Allie Brown, if you're not familiar with her, she has a podcast. Again, she was an Inc. 500 coach. She was the first mentor I ever invested in, but she completely transformed her business after she had twins and is really defying the norm in the coaching industry, which is why I'm so drawn to her. Okay, so let's dive in. So the first thing that I want to share, and again, I invite this to be more of a conversation than a training. It's going to feel different than the other trainings that we've been doing up to this point over the last number of months, because the purpose of this, and this is actually the very first thing I want to share with you, is the difference between questions and answers. So my goal at the end of today is to leave you with questions that I still have, questions that will support you to start thinking about your business differently, that will allow you to stand out in the marketplace and really defy normal. So when I talk about questions versus answers, there's so much power in not knowing things. What's changed so much in our world over the last decade is we have access to so much information that we are asking always how to, as opposed to what if. And that how to, we can ask Siri, how do I do this? Where's this? What's this? We have everything right at our fingertips. And as a result, we're training our brains to not think creatively and innovatively like we used to. We're actually slowing down access to our higher wisdom because information is so readily available to us. And we're focused so much on getting the answers that we have a hard time sitting and being patient with the questions. So I'm going to pose some questions throughout today for you to consider and to really sit with and be with. And this has become an uncomfortable space for us. We don't like not having the answers. We want the answers. So we search and we consume information, and we are just on this crazy desire for more and more. And look at this group. Look how much content I'm sharing here. And look how many of you are showing up every single week. So again, this is a big shift to get comfortable not having the answers. One of the quotes, I wish I could remember who it is, was that we are Googling the delight out of things. Think about that. We are Googling the delight out of things. We are missing the journey, the unfolding of finding the answers because we can access them so quickly. And we're consuming rather than creating. When we're consuming, we can't create. And when we're consuming other people's creations, as opposed to tapping into our higher wisdom and our divine guidance and the answers in the collective consciousness, as opposed to just the answers that are ranked the highest on Google or SEO or whatever that stuff is. So that's one of the pieces about getting more comfortable with questions. So there's actually I'll have to find the link, but there's a Harvard Business article about how consultants are doing consulting differently. And so what we want to actually work with our clients on, and what we want to actually work with ourselves on, is rather than trying to come up with the answer, try to come up with the right question and sit in that. Right? So what if rather than trying to come up with answers, we said, and we did brainstorming and we did connecting on what are the questions we want to start asking ourselves? What are the questions that will help us take our businesses to the next level, as opposed to what are the answers? The other big thing here is that in order for us to create questions and be with questions, we're also shifting our focus from execution, from doing, from implementing, to act, to hustle, into more space, into more being. And you know what? If we get really honest with ourselves, this is an uncomfortable thing for us. This is an uncomfortable thing. As soon as we come up with the question, our minds automatically start searching for the answer. Okay, I'm going to check in with you guys because, like I said, I really want this to be a conversation. So yeah, keep sharing what's coming up for when you start thinking about Googling the delight out of things, having so much information at our fingertips and what that's doing to our creativity and our innovation. Tommy, hey. Yeah, you're intuitively picking up. Like I feel, yeah, I'm beaming, but I feel so broken open. Oh, and it's beautiful. And unusual. So yes, it was a huge week. So those of you, and just think about this, like how you get so in your own environment, like when you get out of your environment and when you start connecting with people, man, it breaks you open. So that's huge in and of itself. And I'll be talking more about that. Janelle, thank you for holding space. I know I'm not vulnerable unless space is held. So everybody who's here and watching the replay too, I know I'm in a safe place when I can be this vulnerable. So thank you, Janelle. Okay, so let's go on to the other big earth-shattering thing. And actually, it wasn't even that earth-shattering, but it hit me different than it's ever hit me before. And I have a new commitment to it. And that's that to be ruthlessly in your zone of genius. To be ruthlessly in your zone of genius. So how many of you are crystal clear about exactly what your zone of genius is? And if you aren't, that's okay. Again, a fantastic question to ask yourself and sit with. So one of the things that you can ask yourself about your zone of genius is, when do you find yourself in flow? And this question sounds so cliche, but have you really given yourself permission to flesh it out? If money were truly no issue, if time were truly no issue, what would you choose to do? How would you choose to spend your days? I've asked myself this question multiple times, but it's been unfolding for me throughout many years, and it's still unfolding. I still don't know if I really can understand fully what my zone of genius is. But what I do know is, and some of this stuff is based on The Big Leap, which is a phenomenal book. We talk about upper limiting in here before. But the zone of genius is, so many of us get stuck in our zone of excellence. So the zone of excellence is that those are the things that you're really good at. You're super efficient, super productive, you can do it really well. And it's our zone of excellence that keeps us in a place of mediocrity and keeps us from then reinvesting that energy into our zone of genius. And if you had enough money for a lifetime, what would you be doing with your time? How would you be spending it? How would you be sharing your gifts? What would you be doing to contribute yourself with the world? what would be the fullest expression of who you are if, again, you just gave yourself permission to be in your zone of genius? And one of the things that comes up around this that allows us to be in our zone of genius is, and this has been a huge theme coming up in a lot of our groups, as well as with, I just re-engaged one of my coaches last month, with every single time we up level, we're required to step into a new level of boundaries. And in order for us to be in our zone of genius, we have to set stronger boundaries. That means that rather than asking ourselves what we should be doing, it's crucial we're asking ourselves what we should not be doing, what's not in our zone of genius. And it's the power of no and the power of delegation. Now, self-admittedly, delegation has been something that's been really challenging for me. So this zone of genius, the power of saying no and delegation, it's so silly. It's what are all the things that I have grabbing at my bandwidth? All these little things, making the kids lunches, doing the laundry, the groceries, cleaning the house, personal life, and then my business too, managing this tech tool, that tech tool. And thank goodness. And that was when I had this huge realization. I was like, wow, after you start delegating and you find those people that are so phenomenal to add to your team and to add to your posse, you want to find just more and more, because there's so many other things that it's other people's zone of genius, but it's not my zone of genius. And yeah, what can you delegate? And what gets in the way of you hiring support that frees you up? Let me ask you this. What gets in the way of you hiring support that frees you up from your zone of excellence and gives you the space to be in your zone of genius, especially if your zone of genius is super identified? So for me, this has become so clear. This is why you guys see me almost every single week in here. Is my zone of genius is teaching. My zone of genius is speaking. More so than writing, right? So if I can teach, if I can speak, if I can share, if I can connect deeply over conscious conversation and elevated conversation, then I'm in my zone of genius. I could do it all day. That's why these trainings are so damn long all the time, right? Because they just go on, because this is my flow space. And so then it's find your zone of genius and don't even worry about monetizing it, because so many, when this group started 7 months ago, many of you have been here from the very start. When this group started 7 months ago, and again, there hasn't even been an invitation until Monday when I invited you all to a 30-minute success call, business breakthrough call, without any invitations. This group, just from being in my zone of genius, without even trying to generate business out of it, has generated multiple six figures in the last 7 months. And it's simply because when you're in your zone of genius, the magic and the abundance floods in. So when we quit asking the question again, what's the right questions to be asking ourselves? When the question is, how can I monetize it? How can I make money from it? How can I turn it into a business? We're asking ourselves the wrong question. So when we step into our zone of genius, it's stepping deeper into trust instead of ego. So the questions are, how can I step more fully into my zone of genius? Because I know when I'm in my zone of genius, the universe, God, source, rains abundance on me in all forms. In fulfillment, in happiness, in time freedom, in space, and money, all of it. So I want to hear, who knows what their zone of genius is? Share your zone of genius here. And this is something that you peel back further and further. I also know my zone of genius is I can read the energy of a room really quickly, which is what makes me a great speaker and a great trainer. And then I can shift things to match the energy of the room. I also know that I can read the energy of a person very quickly. So I know these are little superpowers. So what are your superpowers? What's your zone of genius? What comes easy for you that you don't even know you're doing it? Erin, this is my challenge when I have so many gifts. So this is like a huge opportunity, Erin, because how many of those gifts are your zone of excellence, and how do you discern your zone of excellence from your zone of genius? That makes perfect sense. I used to feel the same way. Oh my gosh, I'm great at this and I'm great at that, and I can do this and I can do that, and I can do it faster than anybody else, and I can do it better than anybody else. And then all of a sudden it was like my zone of excellence, and I didn't even realize it until I didn't even realize it. So it'd be interesting if you kept peeling it back further and further, Erin, of what's truly zone of genius versus zone of excellence. And maybe it's all zone of genius, who knows? But what's coming to me right now is that there's a reason why the universe gives us a couple of really strong superpowers, because that's how we fit into the tapestry of the collective consciousness. And if we all had hundreds and hundreds of superpowers, it wouldn't really make a ton of sense in the connection to the whole, is what's coming. Awesome, awesome. Thank you all for sharing your zone of genius here. Okay, that's the second thing. So the third thing I wanted to share with you that I really got out of this, and actually this was brewing before I went to the event, but it got even more solidified and validated at the event, at the Creative Strategy Workshop with Allie Brown. And this isn't going to surprise you. The power of a decision. The power of a decision. So this hit me in another mastermind that I was in this summer. And it's the most simplistic and silly thing. Like, it seems silly, but it was like, holy shit. My coach was dead on. Anything you haven't accomplished or done that you want to, anything that you don't have that you want to, is simply boils down to that you haven't decided to have it. You haven't decided to go for it. You haven't decided to do it. And so you haven't decided to play fearlessly with it. So when you start thinking about it, all boils down to decision. Like, I would love to be healthier. Look it, I know exactly what to do. I know I'm capable of doing it. Yet I hadn't made a decision to become healthier. So how can I then complain or feel frustrated or get down on myself or feel self-doubt when at the end of the day, I just haven't made a decision? It's like P90X. Decide, commit, succeed. Just haven't made a decision. So what will it take for you to make a decision? And the minute that we make a decision, like we truly put a stake in the ground and make a decision, the universe starts conspiring. And so this was something that has been coming up in our groups lately, because it's, so what's something that you think is, I'll be ready when? What's something you're dying to do that you see yourself doing somewhere down the road in your business? And really, what's getting in the way of doing it now? If it's doing an event, if it's running a retreat, if it's running a group program, like, what are the self-imposed rules that you're either believing or that you're putting on yourself that need to be undone so that you can make the decision and just go for it and do it? And again, this is where trust comes into play versus ego. Trust that when something's in our heart, when we have a vision, when we have something that we want to bring out into the world, that we want to birth out into the world, and the fear that it might not work or whatever else comes in, it takes decision and a trust. It wouldn't be in your heart. You wouldn't have the nudge. You wouldn't have the pull to do it unless it was meant to come to fruition. And it's simply making the decision and not backing down from it. And so here's the question I want to leave with you. If you were truly fearless, if you had pure fearlessness and nothing could happen that could harm you based on that fear, what would you do? If you were truly fearless, what would you do? What would you be doing? Who would you be? How would you be showing up? And it's making the decision to go there. So the power of a decision, releasing the I'll be ready when, and setting all these parameters that are self-made, that are coming solely from our head, as opposed to just making the decision. Okay, so the fourth thing that this one's huge. This one's a game changer. And that's that we have got to defy normal or we're going to be disrupted. So think about this. Think about the taxi industry. What happened? Think about Blockbuster. What happened? Think about hotels and travel. What happened? Think about Sony and the Walkman. What happened? They've all become and are on their way of becoming obsolete because their industry has been disrupted, because nothing is permanent and everything changes. Yes, Uber happened. Uber happened, exactly. And what we just kept hearing over and over again is these big companies who keep doing what's always worked no longer works, and they couldn't see the disruption coming. So we have got to think about defying normal. It's time for us to create new frameworks. It's time for us to create new paradigms, new models. And the pain that we're having in our business is coming from doing things normally, believing that there's some industry standard that we have to follow, rather than following our own guidance and doing it in our own way. So we default to ordinary by being normal, by doing things the way everybody else is doing them. We're defaulting to ordinary. How can we be extraordinary? How can we step into our greatness? How can we step into our destiny if we're defaulting to ordinary and not willing to defy normal. So what gets in the way of us defying normal? Fear, fear, fear. What other people think. Yes, Angela, the biggest fear of them all. What will other people think? Or how will I get paid? Isn't it wild that we're willing to bet on so many things but ourselves, but our own ideas, but our own wisdom? We're willing to invest in so many things. I mean, how many programs and things have we invested in outside of ourselves, outside of our own ideas, outside of our own, like betting on ourselves? But could you imagine if we bet on ourselves instead of bet on other industries, other companies desiring to be accepted and not judged? Yes, Erin. Yeah, these are the reasons why we're terrified to defy normal. And here's the thing, is industry norms are your enemy. Industry norms are your enemy. So this hit me huge at this event. Industry norms are your enemy. And I realized, like, where did those rules come from? I see so many coaches ask, like, how much do you charge for? How much do people typically charge for coaching? How long are the sessions? These are, again, we're asking these questions and asking for answers, but they're not the questions that we would be asking ourselves if we were truly up-leveling our businesses. We wouldn't be asking questions like that. We would be asking, how can I design my business in a way that allows me to be in my zone of genius the most? As opposed to, what do other people sell for? And what do other people do? And how do they set up their packages? What's the norm? How long do they go through training? What programs did they invest in? As opposed to other questions that are for you. What's my zone of genius? What model would allow me to be in my zone of genius the majority of the time? How can I simplify my processes? How can I make this easier? What do I actually need to know to take my next step? Those kind of questions. Different kind of question. Different kind of question. Exactly, Stacy, because that's the industry norms. Everyone teaches the same tactics because that's the norm. How do you do video? How do you do this? How do you do that? We're asking how to instead of what if. What if I did it totally differently? What if I didn't make offers at the end of my videos? What if I just showed up in the fullest expression myself? What if I shared what I really want to share? What if my opinions ruffled feathers? As opposed to how to get more people to like what I'm sharing, how to get more people engaged. There's a big difference. We're shifting from how to what if. So here's another question I want to leave you with. This was a question that we were asked at the conference, and it's, what are 5 to 10 things that are so opinionated, that are so strongly your opinions, that you would seriously feel terrified to share them within your industry? Or what are, so there's one question. Again, some of you might want to come back to this and just listen for the questions and spend some time journaling on them. Or what are the 5 industry norms that you want to do differently? What are the 5 industry norms that you want to do differently? What are the things that everybody in your industry are doing? So for the coaching industry, I want to go back to my notes here because so many of you are in the coaching industry. They're doing launches. Who says you have to do launches? They're doing JV partners. And this is the thing. Those are things that I've never done in my business. They're doing webinars. Now that's one of the norms that I stepped into. I started following this whole webinar norm thing. It's how I built my whole business. But again, at some point in our businesses, it's one thing to start there, but it's another thing to get stuck there. And it's time to defy those norms. Being normal and following our industry norms are the enemy. They are the enemy. If we follow the industry norms, we're going to be disrupted. Here's the other thing that came up. And we were put in this position of, with everything that's happening with Facebook, right? And I want you to think about this. With everything that's happening with Facebook, what if the Facebook apocalypse happened? What would you do? How would you grow your business if there was no more social media? If it all was gone tomorrow? But because of what was happening with Facebook, the rest of the social media sites got terrified as well, and they all shut down too. So that's what we need to start thinking about when we think about defying the norm, is we got to start creating our own paths and our own ways and get innovative. So it's not a question of if, it's a question of when we'll be disrupted. Right now, the coaching industry is on a launch bubble. I was hearing all about this at the event because there were people who built their businesses single-handedly with JV partners and Facebook ads and how fast they're changing too. Jay, you think about that. JV partners, these relationships have been permanently damaged because all of a sudden the launches didn't go the way that they were planned and they quit paying people out. There's this huge bubble happening in the coaching industry. And what's crazy and what's even more scary is people are still teaching all the stuff that no longer works because they've chosen to stick with what they thought worked as opposed to innovate a new way of teaching it. So a lot of what you're seeing out there, a lot of what's being shared out there is the same shit. It wasn't shit 20 years ago, but it's the same stuff that was being taught 20 years ago. And we have evolved beyond it. So it is our role, unless we innovate, yes, unless we get creative, unless we defy our industry norms, we will be disrupted. And you're going to watch, and I'm already watching, coaches that built empires crumble and fall because they stayed stuck in an old industry norm. Yeah. Okay. So it is exciting when we're willing to break out of the ordinary, innovate, and create instead of consume. Okay. The fifth thing I want to share with you is the 3 things to do exactly that. The 3 things to create instead of consume. The 3 things that will add fireworks to your business. And those 3 things are: people want authenticity and no longer smoke and mirrors. I'm just checking that, Amy, because here's the crazy thing too, is even authenticity is being commoditized in a way. Like teaching people how to be authentic, teaching people how to express themselves. That's defeating the purpose, isn't it? And again, I'm sharing all this not from a place of judgment, but from a place of we can't be ignorant to this stuff. We have got to shift our consciousness to the level of creation, innovation, and intuition, and trust. The biggest one of all, trust. Because without it, we're ignorant to the disruption that our world is waiting for, that our world wants, the new paradigms that we're craving. Okay. Yes, like the phoenix rising. Amen, Tommy. So let's be the phoenixes. That's what I want everybody in this group to feel inspired to step out and be the phoenixes. And that means it's going to be uncomfortable. And you know what? What's heartbreaking is how few people are really willing to be a pioneer and step up and be a leader because of the fear of rejection and because of the fear of non-acceptance and because of the fear of not being liked. Jim Carrey, in one of his speeches, I can't think of which one, you guys will know which one. If you don't look it up, it was a college graduation speech. He says, your need for being liked is making you invisible. Your need for being liked is making you invisible. It's time to be seen in all of your glory. When I first listened to that, it was like a dagger. It was like a truth bomb to my heart for sure. Okay, where was I? Yes, 3 things. Okay, the 3 things to create fireworks in your business. The 3 things to be able to create and innovate is space. Creativity needs space. So if we're always consuming and if we're always searching for answers, we don't have the space to create. I'm going to talk more about space soon. The second thing we need is stimulation. And the third thing we need is experimentation. When we find the sweet spot of space, stimulation, and experimentation, we are in the zone. We are in the zone of creation and innovation. So space, and then when I talk about stimulation, this is where in order for us to break our industry norms, we have to break out of being everywhere our industry is. So as coaches, if we're in the ICF, all we're seeing is all coaching related stuff. One of my favorite places was I had this realization of how I had been taught to do sales from a bunch of coaches, teaching coaches was one way. And I kept hearing the same tactics over and over again, like you were mentioning, Stacy. And all of a sudden I'm like, you know what? There's sales in every industry. Why am I learning how to do sales only from coaches? I would like to learn some sales mastery stuff from people in other industries to start stretching my mind. And it was amazing. And then from there, because I was introduced to all of these other ways, I could create from my own space and do it in my way because I was stimulated in all these other ways. And the other ways that we stimulate ourselves is not only in where we're learning and where we're gaining information. One of the exercises that we did, this was so fascinating. We were all told to bring 2 magazines that we would never read. And the magazines that showed up, you guys were like, I didn't even know they existed. And we had 20 minutes, and I invite each and every one of you to do this experiment. Go somewhere where there's a big pile of magazines and grab a magazine that you're like, I can't even believe that people would even ever subscribe to this. and start to page through that magazine, you will be amazed. You'll be amazed at the ideas and the stimulation that comes from things that wouldn't typically grab your interest. There was a gourds magazine there, like for gourds. And you just you wouldn't even believe the stimulation and the creativity that starts to get sparked. So it's what we're learning. It's also stimulation and changing our environment, which is why it's so important to get out of your town to I know many of you love to travel, right? But do it for your business too. Get out of your town, get into a new space. Go work out of a beautiful 5-star hotel in your town for a day. Get out of your space, create new experiences to stimulate yourself. And then experimentation, and this is a big one. Most of us aren't willing to take the risk and experiment. When you think about kids, they're so great at experimenting. And we're so afraid, oh, I'm going to make a bad business decision. It's like remembering that sometimes those are just decisions that we're just experimenting and they didn't go the way that we'd hoped they would go. It doesn't mean that we're bad at business or that it's our fault or that we messed up. We all make bad decisions when it comes to our business, but it never started as a bad decision. It was only judged as a bad decision after the fact. It was simply experimentation beforehand. We were simply experimenting, trying different things out, taking some risks. Because how can you define normal if you don't take risks? Because what you're doing with experimentation is you're stepping into the unknown. You're stepping into unproven land. It hasn't been proven yet. How do you know if it's going to work? And that's why when we're in our zone of genius, it always works. Like when we do these trainings, this is more for me than it is even for you guys, because this allows me to be in my zone of genius. I process really powerfully when I speak for myself. Even if this fails miserably on some accord, it didn't fail at all because I'm in my zone of genius. I can't lose. So that's the other advantage of being in your zone of genius, right? We have to make some bad decisions in order to learn. And again, how do we judge them as bad decisions? Because how would we learn without them? You're so dead on that. And you guys have heard me say one of my favorite quotes, you either win or you learn. It's if it either works out or you learn. But how do we learn if we're not experimenting and we're not just playing in our zone of genius? Because when we play in our zone of genius, it always works. And the only time it doesn't work is when we become attached to needing something more than the zone of genius that we're sharing. When all of a sudden we put expectations and weights on being on our zone of genius, that's the only time that we would judge it as not working, because being in the zone of genius in and of itself, it feels fulfilling and successful. And I don't know, I guess a lot of us make the mistake of defining success by money. But at the end of the day, when you're in your zone of genius, when you're in flow, when you're being fulfilled, when you feel happy, when you feel joy, when you feel peace, okay, I don't know. I guess sometimes we get challenged in how we define success. I know I've been challenged by defining it. Again, when I was feeling nervous and anxious about stepping into that event, it was like, okay, I'm like, there's women in this room making $20 million in their businesses. And I'm like at multiple 6 figures. Who am I to be here? Because I was defining success in some weird way of money in that moment, which is just money comes, money goes. You can create as much or as little as we want. But when we're in our zone of genius, it comes a lot easier. Oh, here's the other thing too about the bad business stuff. It's wild, right? Like how we judge ourselves in our businesses. Yeah, there are people walking around with $100,000 in school loans and they aren't feeling any guilt about having school loans. But oh man, if we got a little debt on our business, wow, we like carry that. We carry that weight on our backs, whether it's a bad investment or a bad decision, whatever it is. It's wild. Who said that business debt is not okay, but school debt is okay? Like, where do those rules come from? It gets you wondering, right? Okay, experimentation. Okay, so I have another great question I want to pose for all of you. There's one way we can experiment, and this is again how we can define normal too. And it's around our customers' experience. So start thinking about, if you want to be extraordinary in your industry, start thinking about, what is nobody else taking the time to do? What would blow your clients or your customers away? So start thinking about, how can you create a more powerful customer experience? One of the women in the room said that she was invited to Tiffany's for a chef, and she has a number of chefs, and she's the founder of HireAChef.com. She said she was invited to Tiffany's for her birthday. She flew out to Manhattan. She was invited to Tiffany's to have a breakfast at Tiffany's literally a breakfast at Tiffany's. And she had a private tour of all of their hidden vaults. She was trying on jewelry worth millions upon millions of dollars, wearing it. They made her birthday cake. And at the end of it all, so what's this all about? Why is all this happening? And they're like, this is just what we do. So you want to know how much it cost? Nothing. It was free. Anybody and everybody can have that experience. It's a part of what Tiffany's does to create a customer experience, whether they're a customer or not. So Tiffany's, you don't see Tiffany's running Facebook ads. You don't see Tiffany's running Super Bowl commercials. Why not? Because they're doing things differently. They're advertising in a different way, leveraging customer experience. So she shared that story in a room with 50 people. I'm sharing that story here with almost 1,000 of you in this group. So you can see Tiffany's is marketing in a different way to their high-end market. So every single time that any one of you walks by a Tiffany's anywhere, you're likely going to remember what they do for their customers and even not their customers. You don't even have to be their customer, but it sticks. Okay, the other experimentation question I want you to ask. So the first one was around customer experience. How can you really create a mind-blowing customer experience? The second one is, this one I thought was fascinating. If I were my own biggest competitor, how would I defeat myself? Or how would I crush my business so hard my offers right now would become obsolete? So this is, I think it was IBM who does this with every new product creation. So again, I'm going to go back to the Walkman, right? So as soon as the iPod was created, Walkmans became obsolete. They served no purpose. They serve no purpose today. So how would you make yourself become obsolete? And this is what starts to get you ahead of your own curve. And I haven't quite gotten this. This one's still like one of those ones that's like still really sitting with me. But if it's trying to compete by price, you just can't survive that way in business. If it's trying to compete by how much you're giving, you're going to hit a breaking point there. So it's a question that allows you to start thinking out of the box, start getting more creative and innovative about how to defy normal and how to stay on top of your own game. Okay, so the sixth thing that I want to share, and this is going to be an expansion on something I previously shared. So I mentioned that the 3 things to create fireworks in your business were space, experimentation, and stimulation. So let's talk a little bit more about space, because with space, there's 3 things that you want to take a look at about creating space. So we can't create and we can't implement our creative ideas if we don't have the space to do. So if your business model is set up so that you don't have space, it will always be that business model. It won't be able to evolve and grow and shift and change. And so the 3 aspects of space to consider are your environment, being in an environment that's inspiring, being in an environment that creates space for you. I've talked about not having clutter around your desk area for a lot of different reasons. It interferes with the ability to really, 1, get creative, 2, money loves a place to land, 3, it's very distracting. I'm going to share this business idea that I went and bought the domain, so I feel comfortable sharing it. I normally wouldn't think like that, but I'm like, this is so good. But so when you start thinking about your space, your physical environment, it's crucial to really honor and create space. We were talking at the event about actual psychogeometry, how not mixing spaces too. Right now, I'm in my living room. And this is something that I know there's a huge opportunity for me to make some adjustments around. So it's maybe you always do your admin work one place, maybe you do all your client work one place, but have a creative space, a space where you create that's free and clear from distraction, that's free and clear from your phone and from the email and from all of that. It's the same thing. We don't want to taint spaces. We don't want to bring arguments into our bedrooms. It taints that space that's meant and created for love and for physical affection, right? So think about your office space and really put some energy and some thought into the space that you're creating. Okay, so that's the first one, the environment. Now, the second one is your calendar. How much space do you have in your calendar? This is so crucial. We have got to have space in our calendar. This is something I used to be so good at, and now I'm not. I used to never have anything on Fridays. I would always have Fridays be I love me days, just pure space to do whatever I wanted, however I wanted. Sometimes it'd be business, sometimes it'd be personal. It wouldn't really matter, but Fridays used to always be, and clearly Fridays are not, because here I am and have been for a few weeks. So that was a big eye opener for me, is like, I'd like to create more space. And so Allie's strong recommendation was one day during the work week, one full day of space, just where you don't have anything on your calendar. You just can wake up and it's like the world is your oyster, and you can just choose to do whatever you're called to do without any obligations or responsibilities. And then the second thing is on the weekends, preferably one whole day that business is completely off. Zero email, zero response, zero anything. And again, I mentioned about setting stronger boundaries every time that we up level. And this is something that is a huge opportunity for me, to set stronger boundaries and not be so responsive, and really take that one day and be clear about that when I'm working with clients. So clients who are on, it's coming. And I know all of you would like love it, and you would appreciate it, and you would like celebrate it. So that's what's wild, is why don't we take space? Because our clients want us to take space too. So the second one was your calendar. Now the third one, and I alluded to this a little bit earlier, is your bandwidth. So I realized that there's so many things that I say in my life that I just say, I'll just do it. Oh, I'll just do it quick. Oh, it won't take me long. And those are things that are grabbing at our bandwidth. I know we have some very conscious men in this group, but this is something really huge for women, because especially as you're growing a really strong business, I realize my role hasn't changed as my business has grown, meaning I still take on as much responsibility as I did when I first left my full-time job. It's just something that I've always done. So I just continue to do, in spite of the fact that my business is in a completely different place than it was when I first left my job. And so this bandwidth piece, it was really eye-opening for me when I realized how many things are grabbing at your bandwidth. How many things are you really juggling? And I started unpacking it all. Like I mentioned on my wall, I just started unpacking everything that I'm juggling, everything that can pull my attention, no matter how small it might seem. And it's really amazing how many things pull at our bandwidth, pull at our attention at any given moment. And then once you have that crystal clear and you have your zone of genius clear, you can start making conscious choices about what you can let go of, what you can delegate. If it means hiring somebody, like I'm really strongly considering, if I can find the right person right now, hiring a personal assistant to help with a lot of errands. And of course, hiring somebody. I used to have somebody clean the house, and I don't anymore. And it's what would make sense to have somebody come and do that stuff for us, because it just keeps pulling and pulling. So start thinking about all the stuff that's pulling and how can you create space? And I had a lot of space today, and I just really have been sitting with a lot of this stuff. And I have some really big things brewing for my business right now. And some of them mean taking a sharp right turn and letting go of things that have been created and things that I was really passionate about and things that I've done for a while. And in order to step into this new and innovative space, it means phasing out some of that old stuff. And for some of you, it's the sharp right turn from your full-time job and moving into a full-time entrepreneur. And others of you, it's letting go of things that you created and you poured your heart and soul in, but are no longer in alignment. And just giving yourself that space to really live in that zone of genius. Yeah. So I just want to check in here. Stephen, I'm not letting go of this group, but it may be shifting. It may be shifting. So I'll share with you guys. There's an idea that I've been having. And again, I can see it so clearly now. This event really opened me up to it. And again, it's defying the norm. It's like, why am I running my business? I feel like I defy the norms in little ways. I don't run a traditional mastermind. I don't really do private coaching by itself. Like there's a lot of things I don't do that technically in the coaching industry people do. But this is the sharp right turn. So one of the things that I have a brand, like a full brand and company idea that's super multifaceted on the top of my mind. And it's something that came to me 2 years ago through divine inspiration. And it's this concept of the wealthy minimalist. And it's this really, and it's so much of what I teach in here already. It's like really digging deep for the meaning and the fulfillment, and knowing that you can manifest huge wealth, financial wealth, not just abundance too, obviously, but how do you be wealthy and minimal? And so many of the most successful entrepreneurs are minimalists. And I think there's a big misconception in the marketplace that, especially now with all the marketing we see, oh, successful entrepreneurs, they have mansions and Lamborghinis. And we see all this. And I just know that the world is ready for simplification and more meaning and getting back to our roots and squeezing the juiciness out of our life. And so I see a whole brand around this, and I see my company not just being me. I see it being bigger. I see it being more global. I'm seeing things more clearly than ever before. I see having merchandise. I see having certification or facilitator programs. I see having products. I see doing a lot of live events. I see everything being very different. And so that's my big, sharp right turn. So yeah, there was my little rant about the wealthy minimalist. And it's a big right turn for me because I've never invested in really amazing branding, and I've always invested in coaches and mentors, but I'm being called to invest in really beautiful photography and really high-end, simplistic and luxurious beautiful things. And yeah, it's exciting. Okay, so there's my little share. So let me just check in. So what's standing out? What are some of the questions you're willing to hold instead of have to have the answer for? And what would be different if our job as coaches was actually to help not even our clients come up with all the right answers that they have for themselves, but some of the right questions, and to start actually helping them come up with the questions that then they can get comfortable asking themselves questions and coming up with the answers on their own, as opposed to us coming up with the questions for them. So yeah, what is standing out to you? What's the takeaway? What are some of the questions you're going to ask yourself? What are some of the things you're going to sit with? What are some of the things you might start doing differently or might showing up a little bit differently? Okay, so I just want to thank all of you for holding this space today. Like I mentioned, the vulnerability on the front end, again, I appreciate you holding the space. I appreciate your interest in learning how to disrupt our own industry and how to stand more fully in your gifts and your zone of genius and share it. And my biggest hope for you is that you just be willing to play full out on you. Like, just play full out on you. Not play full out to make a difference in the world, not play full out to share your gifts with the world, not play full out to make a killing, just play out full out for you. That's my wish for you. That's my hope for you. And you know what, you guys, if you're trying a bunch of stuff and it's not working, it's just because you've not made the decision to play in your business, in your zone of genius. It's so funny. Like, how many times are we upper limiting ourselves by focusing on things that really just distract us from making decisions to disrupt, to defy normal, to create our own rules, to do it our way, to innovate and to create, right? How many times do we just create distractions because of our fears to really be willing to disrupt? Okay, so that said, I'm going to shut down for this Friday, and wishing you all a beautiful weekend. And again, thank you for being here. Thank you for holding space. And I look forward to the other responses, those of you that are watching on replay, or those of you that are taking these questions and sitting with them. Know that you can come back and continue to unfold here on how we're defying and creating a new normal, especially the coaching industry is ready for new norms. The entrepreneurial space, like all of it, is ready for new norms, ready for new paradigms, ready for new thought leaders, ready for new change makers, ready for extraordinary. And that is each and every one of you. So thank you. Thank you. We'll see you guys. Bye.